You've got to come back with me. Where? Back to the future.
What's a sequel supposed to do? On the most basic level, it's probably supposed to do what every movie should, right? Entertain us. But when a movie isn't introducing us to a new world, but instead building on one, the rules, or at least the expectations, change. That's because a sequel, or at least a thoughtful one, is always trying to strike a balance between two very different goals. Evoking the feelings that made the original a success, while also doing enough that's new to make sure things aren't repetitive or stale. And that's a tough thing to do. While of course, some of the best movies of all genre films are sequels, The Empire Strikes Back, The Two Towers, Secret of the Ooze, there are also a good amount of sequels that didn't quite meet expectations. Box office numbers aside, if sequels, more often than not, are long-term emotional letdowns rather than successes, then why do we always get our hopes up? And what if there was a sequel that right there on the screen asks these still relevant questions about itself? Well, in 1989, that movie did come out and it was called Back to the Future Part 2.
What happens to us in the future? What, do we become assholes or something?
Back to the Future Part 2 was, of course, the follow-up to 1985's culture-defining Back to the Future, a film whose crazy premise and immense charm created a magic that probably took even its own creators by surprise. Don't say what you're planning to say at the end of this video. What? Why? I'll be fine. No, not you. The comments. Something's gotta be done about the comments. What if, what the f are you? I'm gonna be fine. Just let me do what I do. All right. I'm only you from the future. Me, I guess, right? Wait, why am I wearing the same clothes? Why do I smell? On its 30th year anniversary, here's everything you didn't know about Back to the Future Part 2. Produced by Avid Entertainment and Universal Pictures, and premiering on November 22nd, 1989 to cash in on the big Thanksgiving weekend movie rush, Back to the Future Part 2 was one of the most highly anticipated sequels that's ever been released. It made a truckload of money, grossing $332 million worldwide on a $40 million budget.
Yes!
Although, interestingly enough, it was still only the third highest grossing movie of that year. Both Indiana Jones, The Last Crusade, and Tim Burton's Batman made more. Part 2 picked up right where Part 1 left off, taking Doc's famous last line,
Roads, where we're going, we don't need roads.
As a jumping off point for traveling into Hill Valley's future, where Doc has a plan to stop Marty's son from ending up in jail.
That's why we're here today, to prevent this incident from ever happening.
I actually saw Part 2 before ever seeing Part 1 because my pops picked up Part 2 on VHS, so needless to say, I was confused but intrigued at the same time. Above all else though, all I ever wanted was this bad boy. Oh, so good. But it doesn't hover. Things go haywire when decrepit Biff Tannen steals the DeLorean and travels back in time to give his younger self the famous sports almanac, giving him the ammo to place winning sports bets for decades and altering time to make Biff one of the richest and most powerful men in America. One of the most ingenious plans in movie history, at least to me. To fix that disaster, Marty and Doc have to go back to November 12th, 1955, the day the climactic events of the first film took place, to get the sports almanac away from young Biff, all while carefully avoiding screwing up the sequencing of events of Part 1.
Marty, whatever happens, you must not let your other self see you. The consequences could be disastrous. Excuse me, sir.
Confusing, but actually very clever. The movie ends on a cliffhanger, promising to be concluded in Part 3. And to this day, I can't think of any other film that has this. It even had footage from the next film to get you hyped for the conclusion. Despite the huge box office numbers and the iconic cultural status the film now has, Part 2 actually got mixed reviews from critics at the time of release. The consensus at the time was that, while charming, the movie was uneven and somewhat stale. But hey, 2001: A Space Odyssey also got mixed reviews, so sometimes, critics don't know
Buttheads.
When we talk about Back to the Future Part 2, one of the most fun things to talk about is, naturally, what the film got right and wrong about the future, which is now our past. And all right, I can already hear y'all saying, Juan, we've already read articles, watched videos, had a 2015 viewing party, and that's awesome, and I get it, but let SYFY WIRE join the list, and hopefully I can bless you with something you didn't know. So, flying cars. Well, unfortunately, that's still something for the future. Kinda. Like with many things, I guess if you have a ton of money, you get first dibs on the future. Aside from flying, the DeLorean also sports a personal fusion reactor that you can fuel up with garbage. That's still a little ways away, but Lockheed Martin is currently working on a fusion reactor that's about the size of a car and can power a small city by itself. So that's cool. The McFlys enjoy a rehydrated pizza.
Hydrate level 4, please.
And while this one may have been more of a sight gag and real speculation about the future, I'm gonna say this technology was basically already around in 1989. I mean, is that pizza so different from astronaut ice cream or the dehydrated food you bring on a camping trip? And if you trail hikers out there, please feel free to weigh in since I've never been hiking. Marty McFly Jr. is shown glued to his TV screen watching a bunch of shows at once.
63, 109, 87 in the Weather Channel.
That technology literally exists, but I also think the scene captures the spirit of modern media consumption too. Young people with a zombified look in their eyes endlessly scrolling through Instagram stories gives you hope, doesn't it? Who am I kidding? I do the same. Future Marty's video call with his coworker and boss also got the immediacy of communication right on the money. It's just they got the size of the device wrong. In fact, a lot of iconic films depicting the future seem to have envisioned video calls in the same way. 2001: A Space Odyssey and Blade Runner both imagine video calling too, but those films and Back to the Future 2 all imagine stationary devices. The future is mobile. It's mobile, dudes. As of the making of this video, there are still only 4 legit films in the Jaws franchise, and we're not counting Cruel Jaws. If you want to, it's your problem.
The shark still looks fake.
But if you think about the way cinematic universes have rapidly expanded sequel production and consumption, then Jaws 19 joke was kind of right on the money too. Also, we could say that 3D advertisement foreshadowed the 3D movie boom that was in full swing in 2015. The Sports Almanac was eerily pretty close.
Wait a minute. Cubs win World Series. Against Miami?
The Cubs didn't win the World Series in 2015, the Mets beat them, but did win it the following year in 2016 for the first time since 1908. The Almanac has the Cubs beating the Miami Gators, and while that's not a real team, the Marlins did change from the Florida Marlins to the Miami Marlins in 2012. When it comes to the hoverboard, we're still waiting for this one to come true. The tech sort of does exist, just not to a mass market. Although there has been a boom of hoverboard-esque devices in the last few years. Yet, don't forget to carry a fire extinguisher in your backpack.
It's on fire! The hoverboard, it exploded under my feet.
In the movie, Marty gets into trouble because the hoverboard doesn't work on water. You remember?
Hey, McFly, you bojo! The cars don't work on water! Unless you've got power!
Love that line. Ironically, that's exactly where a lot of the real-world hover devices do work. Then there's Dark Timeline Biff. Did this guy predict anything? I'm not sure. He seems oddly familiar, but I just can't place it.
Oh, yeah, right.
But as much as Back to the Future Part 2 is about the future, it's also just as much about the past. And although it's subtle, some of Back to the Future 2's genius lies in shots like this.
Be a pal, hand me a 5/8 inch wrench out of that toolbox.
Or this. Or this. As we mentioned before, at the time of release, some critics accused Back to the Future Part 2 of being repetitive or stale. But these scenes aren't just repeating the first film, no, they're reworking it. You know, different angles, different shots from familiar scenes, and on a sort of abstract level, suggesting that magic moments in time, fictional or otherwise, have a kind of infinite depth and possibility. I find that kind of beautiful and moving.
Unbelievable.
The first Back to the Future was the brainchild of Robert Zemeckis, who I actually share a birthday with, and Bob Gale. They were writing partners who had written 1941 for Steven Spielberg, who then became the driving force through Amblin Entertainment in getting the first film to the big screen. The concept purportedly came to Gale after he visited his parents' home, found his dad's old high school yearbook, and wondered if he would have been friends with his dad had they been in school together. A sequel wasn't planned when Zemeckis and Gale created the first film, but given its huge box office success, Universal commissioned them to write a sequel. Zemeckis and Gale wrote the story for Part 2 together, and then Gale wrote most of the first draft alone, while Zemeckis was directing Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Back to the Future Part 2 and Part 3 were filmed back to back, and Part 2 was edited while Zemeckis was directing Part 3. So Zemeckis would direct all day, oversee editing all night, and reportedly get very little sleep, naturally. I'm sure the money, though, that franchise has made over the years have him sleeping like a baby these days. While it may seem quaint by today's standards, Part 2 was actually a groundbreaking movie for industrial light and magic. Wes Takahashi, the animation supervisor, oversaw groundbreaking effects with computer-generated imagery like the Jaws 19 hologram, as well as composing the same actor appearing in multiple places within the same frame. Takahashi also worked on Top Gun and Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade. And he also somehow appeared as an actor in The Hot Chick. You know, The Hot Chick.
It's me, Jessica!
Rick Carter did the production design. He designed the future to look intentionally silly to draw distinction from the typically gloomy and dark dystopian look of the future in other movies, especially recent touchstones like Blade Runner and The Terminator. Carter would go on to work frequently with both Zemeckis and Spielberg on movies like Forrest Gump and Jurassic Park. He also designed Star Wars: The Force Awakens. Alan Silvestri did the music, reprising the motifs of the iconic score from the original film. He's also done work on lots of MCU movies, like composing the iconic Avengers theme. Bless you, sir. Dean Cundey was the cinematographer. He's a genre heavyweight, having also shot Jurassic Park, the original Halloween, and The Thing. Harry Karamidas and Arthur Schmidt were the editors. Karamidas also edited Children of the Corn, and Schmidt edited Jaws 2, Forrest Gump, and Pirates of the Caribbean: Curse of the Black Pearl. Michael J. Fox played Marty McFly.
Nobody calls me chicken.
Marty McFly Jr. and Marlene McFly.
Mom, is that you?
Prior to Back to the Future, Fox was known for Family Ties, and while the role of Marty McFly may have been so iconic as to perhaps ultimately limit his career, he still got on to have significant TV roles on Spin City and The Good Wife, among others. Christopher Lloyd played Doc. While for Lloyd, too, it doesn't get more notable than Back to the Future.
21 gigawatts!
He's been a working actor for 5 decades with roles on Taxi and Clue, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and a personal favorite, The Addams Family, Uncle Fester for life.
Buffet.
Leah Thompson played Lorraine.
Grandma Lorraine. Sweetheart. Hi.
She's an 80s icon who was also in Some Kind of Wonderful and, most importantly, Howard the Duck. Wait, actually, Thompson and Chris Lloyd were in Dennis the Menace together. She was a mom, and he played the hobo. Thomas F. Wilson played Biff Tannen and Griff.
Are you two related?
Hello? Hello? Anybody home? What do you think? Griff just calls me Grandpa for his health?
He was on Freaks and Geeks, but is perhaps most widely known outside of Back to the Future for voicing a plethora of voices on SpongeBob.
I like to kick people's butts.
Crispin Glover did not reprise his role as George McFly because of tumultuous negotiations with Universal over money. He was replaced via prosthetics and some dangling upside-down trickery by Jeffrey Weissman.
I brought pizza for everyone. Oh, who's gonna eat all that?
Oh, I will.
Glover sued over the use of his likeness, and as a result of that legal battle, SAG contracts now contain more detailed stipulations about the use of an actor's likeness. Go figure. Elizabeth Shue played Jennifer.
How about a ride, mister?
Jennifer.
She replaced Claudia Wells, who turned down the role.
How about a ride, mister?
Jennifer.
Shue was later nominated for an Oscar for Leaving Las Vegas, and we also know her from The Karate Kid, Hollow Man, and most recently, Amazon's The Boys. In Blink and You'll Miss 'Em roles, Billy Zane played Match, one of Biff's goons. Red Hot Chili Peppers bassist Flea played Needles, and Elijah Wood, in his first ever role, plays a kid checking out the vintage arcade game in the 80s cafe. Also, we'd be remiss if we didn't bring up Zemeckis' unfathomably cruel hoax against the kids the world over that the hoverboards were real and just hadn't been released by toy manufacturers due to safety concerns.
They've been around for years. It's just that parents groups have not let the toy manufacturers make them, and we got our hands on some, and we put them in the movie.
Unforgivable, Zemeckis. Unforgivable. As a money-making behemoth, Back to the Future naturally led to the creation of media beyond the films themselves. You can bet that kids in 1990 were playing Back to the Future Part 2, the video game, on their computers, Segas, and NESs. There was also a short-lived Back to the Future animated series that ran from 1991 to 1992. And Harvey Comics released a series of Back to the Future issues from 1991 to 1993 as well. But my personal favorite? In the 21st century, from 2008 to 2016, Nike has produced a series of shoes replicating the ones Marty wears in the future, culminating in a limited edition pair dubbed the Mags that actually lace themselves, just like in the movie. Yeah, all right, those are like $60,000. I wish. A good sequel knows that you can't just repeat the past and expect magic a second time. That's why a movie like The Empire Strikes Back took its world in a whole new and deeper direction. Think about how much more complex Darth Vader is in Empire as compared to A New Hope.
I am your father.
But that's sci-fi drama film, and so are Mad Max Fury Road, Aliens, and most other heavy-hitting sequels in genre cinema. Comedies have it tougher, because everyone knows repeating a joke is a surefire way to get no one to laugh. Looking at you, Anchorman 2. Say what? But Back to the Future Part 2 used its vision of the future, smart variations on its classic material, and self-examination to generate new laughs and new emotions. And to that extent, it laid the groundwork for a lot of smart sequel comedies to come like Incredibles 2, 22 Jump Street, and Toy Story 3. And for that matter, Back to the Future Part 3?
Exactly.
What do you guys think? I'm gonna go ahead and say that Back to the Future 2 is not only better than Part 3, but better than part 1. Oh, that's what he was talking about. Thanks for watching. For more everything you know, click here. And for new episodes I drop every other week, make sure you subscribe right here. Nobody's taking this one.